Okay, Assalamualaikum everybody. We're just going to give it one more minute and to kind of have everybody join us. We are going to start in just a minute. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Salam everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us today for our back to school edition of our Let's Talk discussion on motivation. My name is Fatima Sultan. I'm a mental health counselor at An-Nisa. As a therapist, one of the most asked questions I hear from students is, how do I stay motivated and focused at school? Most of them describe themselves as feeling lost. And the concerning part is them not understanding why that is and how they can feel normal again. I would also hear from the parents of these students with the same concern. They're not understanding why their child is so disconnected, why they isolate themselves in their room. And parents would just perceive them as possibly being lazy or just disobedient and not really understanding what's going on. And that's the reality of that is far from that. I honestly believe we need to really identify the problem before we can actually do something about it. So I thought this would be a great topic for discussion with my panelists. I want to welcome Maryam, Annum, and Imran, who are all seniors at University of Houston this year. And I thought it would be great to hear the students' perspective of their challenges in staying motivated. Welcome, guys. Assalamu alaikum. First, I want to congratulate all of you guys for this is your senior year. This is a very exciting time for you guys. And just thank you for being here. So as we go along in the discussion, please feel free to, just add your comments. But I want to start off by asking each of you the same question. And that is, throughout your educational journey from high school to college, explain how you have stayed motivated and focused, and include any struggles or hardships you have encountered. And I'm going to start with Maryam. If you could start, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miriam, as Fatima just said. To describe my journey a little bit, I'm going to go back to high school. I went to DeBakey High School. A lot of you may know it. It's a top high school in Texas and in the nation. It's a medical high school. And I had a lot of struggles in high school. I struggled with math and science classes specifically, especially math. I ended up failing my pre-cal class and having to retake it. And it was just a very, difficult and toxic environment for me. I was not in a good mental health space when I was in high school. It was a very competitive environment, as you can imagine. Teachers weren't very helpful, so they would kind of like bring you down and tell you like you're not good enough, you need to go somewhere else. So it's like that type of environment. And your classmates didn't provide you with a lot of help either, because everyone was trying to like compete with everyone. And I was also in a place where I wasn't like aligned with what I wanted to do. At the time, I thought I wanted to go into the medical field, but that's when I realized that I didn't want to go into the medical field, and it wasn't what I was good at. It wasn't what I was passionate about per se. So that made the experience more difficult, because it kind of was like, I'm in a place where and so I did go through kind of like a depression at that time. I was very lonely. And I also experienced like a lot of failure, which I was not used to personally. In middle school and elementary, I was like always like top dog and stuff like that. And then in college, it got better for me. Because I was doing the things that I like. I'm now a business major, and I plan to go to law school afterwards. So I'm more aligned with like my talents and my passions rather than what I was before. And I'm in things that I enjoy. Really now, I guess my biggest struggle is just like trying to manage so many different things. I know a lot of college students, when they get there, like volunteering on top of work, on top of organizations and work. That's kind of like my struggle at the moment. But I would say like, I'm a lot better now than I was in high school, because I was able to overcome those hardships. Fatima, you're on mute.
You're muted.
Yes, okay, thanks. Okay, so what I'm gaining from what I just heard basically is your main issues during high school was actually two things. You felt that you were in a toxic environment because it seemed like it was high levels of competition, And what you said was really stood out to me is that you weren't really used to failure. And those adjustments right there sounds like it made a huge factor in how you were able to actually maintain and, kind of get through high school. Quick question for you is, how did you end up in high school? Like your grades and at the end of senior year, do you think, how was that?
I think so. I did pretty bad in high school, not gonna lie. I think it got better my junior and senior year. Sophomore year was definitely my worst year. That's when I failed math, and it was just like spiraling with everything going on, from like social interactions to school. Like everything was just bad at that time. I think junior, senior year got a little bit better for me because I kind of learned, like you said, to overcome failure. In my mind, like I was a very perfectionist type of student, and I held myself to the standard where I was like, I cannot become anything if I'm not perfect, if I'm not great, if I don't go to an Ivy League, if I don't, those type of things that we tell ourselves as students. And then I, like junior, senior, was just like, okay, this is just not my forte. It's okay if I fail. Like, it's fine. I ended up retaking the class and had to be in the class. So definitely a big change from like, I think I had a 58 semester Y. So I was pretty bad. Like I failed it hardcore. And then I was also able to, like, once I was able to accept that failure and accept myself, I also in like social relationships did better because I was no longer in this kind of depressed, like we all go through it where you're just like sleeping most of the day, you're barely eating,
Right.
that type of experience. So I was able to just get more comfortable.
Okay, thank you, Maryam. Annum, what is yours? Throughout your education journey from high school and college, explain how you stay motivated and just the hardships that you kind of dealt with.
Yeah, so kind of a little bit different from how Maryam was talking about. I went to a school in Waco, Texas. Waco, Texas is, there's not a very big Muslim population there, but my school is very, very competitive as well. I started off with the ideas of wanting to go into medicine as well, but very quickly I realized that that's something I didn't want to do. I also struggled immensely with motivation in that aspect because I just convinced myself that that is what I'm going to do. Medicine is just, I just have to do it. But it just, I knew it wasn't for me, like deep down, like I just wasn't ready to admit it until I went to college. When I got into college, my first freshman year, I really did try for medicine, but it just wasn't for me either. I honestly felt like what was seamlessly easy for other people was very difficult for me. Literally just bio 1 and chem 1, like I couldn't even get through that. That's where like I absolutely just like broke down. And at that point in time, like I didn't even know what I wanted to do, like because all my life all I thought was medicine, medicine, medicine. From like the time I was like in third grade, I was like, I want to be a pediatrician. But like now I didn't know what to do. So it took me a while to get from a point where I was completely down, like in the dumps, didn't even know how to function. I took a semester off from college because I just didn't know what to do. Like I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know if I was even good enough for trying for something else. I really struggled with a lot of just aspects of feeling proud of like even like something that I did enjoy, which was education in general. I love children. I love everything that I ever worked in job wise was like with children. I just never allowed myself to feel like going into a major like education was good enough for a Muslim Pakistani girl like me. So yeah, I struggled insanely to get to a point where I could admit that I wanted to do something like that. And I also had a lot of difficulty in expressing that to my parents. But when I did, they were very understanding about the fact that I did want to do education. I did want to go get a major in that and become a teacher. So I think I just had all of this built up in my head. And then when I finally accepted it, and I understood that the picture perfect idea that sometimes is out there, that you have to be a doctor, you have to be an engineer, is not what exactly is like something that is the only thing that like your parents could be proud of, or like people around you could be proud of. So I after that semester that I did take off, I kind of found myself in those moments. It was a journey of kind of like being mindful of the present and not fully always focusing on the end goal, even though you do have an end goal. My motivation aspect was just that, like, as long as I'm trying, whatever I am doing, there will be an outcome, like, regardless, just keep trying. Because if I don't, and I just stay where I am, and after that semester, I just continue, like, not trying, I'm not going to get anywhere. So I took baby steps. I slowly started accepting that it's okay to enjoy things that typically other people around me don't probably go for. Like in my college itself, I don't really have very many Muslim girls or even guys that I could lean on for support, but that's kind of how my journey went.
So what I'm hearing the most is basically the struggle was honestly in the beginning and kind of through college is acceptance. Acceptance that like what I'm wanting is not really what I'm really wanting as far as profession, education is not really best suited for me. And that was the struggle, it seemed like, for you, is really connecting and understanding. It's interesting that, we tend to assume that our parents put this, especially with our Muslim Desi or, background, that they are like, okay, you need to be a doctor, you need a doctor. So was that something that your parents wanted for you, or you'd wanted that for yourself and they supported that?
I believe that it was what society, kind of just the Pakistani community in general, wanted from everyone. So when you hear in the conversations like, oh, my child's gonna be a doctor, they're going into engineering, my parents never specifically said that. I just assumed that they would say it if I ever did go against that type of idea. And it was crazy to me that for 19 years, they never said it, but in my head, I just assumed that they did. In my head, it was just like, they're going to be not proud of me. I'm not going to be their favorite child if I didn't do it. So when I did confront them about it, it was actually the complete opposite. I feel like I am their favorite child. Like, they were proud of me for doing what I did do and change something into something that I wanted to do because I wanted to do it.
That's actually, as a parent, that's very interesting to hear too. Honestly, this is really interesting to hear. Okay, Imran, what about you? Kind of give us a little background about your educational journey and, your struggles and hardship through that.
Sure. So I would say my entire life, I always thought I was going to be an engineer. I thought, when I was like 11, 12, everything I gravitated towards was just very technical. Like, I loved that, like math, science, it was my thing. And, as I progressed through high school, got really good grades, did, all the necessary extracurriculars, like all the robotics. But I don't think any of it was brag-worthy at all, because I don't think it adequately, prepared me for college in the first place. I really do think that, but as I entered college in 2019 as a freshman, I entered as a computer engineering major, at UH, I thought, this is it. And I was a commuter student in my freshman year at the time. I ended up living on campus my junior year, and I continue to do that in my senior year. But my freshman year, I was a commuter student, and about a month into just settling into the first courses, the introductory courses, introduction to engineering and whatnot. I'm driving home, and I talked to my mom. She's sitting in the living room, and I tell her, I said, I don't think I'm supposed to be doing this. I don't feel it. Because something was telling me at the time that I should be a psychiatrist. Something was telling me that. So that I should go to medical school, do an additional 4 years, go into debt, some pretty decent debt too, and help people. That's what came to me at 18. That's what my epiphany was. And I don't know, it was powerful, it was strong. I'm glad, I had it then. I felt like something was telling me to do this with my life, but I was studying engineering, and that's what I was good at, but she talked to me and she said, hey, just try to do both. And I'm like, she said, no pressure, just try. There's no pressure at all. You don't have to be the doctor engineer's son. That's not what I'm asking of you. That's what she told me. But she said, this is what you like, but this is what you feel like you need to do, then do both. But that's a lot easier said than done. These courses just like, they really humbled me. And as I went through my undergraduate career, my GPA dipped slowly until I eventually lost my academic excellence scholarship, and that really hit me pretty hard. I went into, I don't really like to say I was depressed because of academics, because I always keep in the back of my mind that this is school. This is not that serious at the end of the day. I have my relationship with God. I have my relationship with family. I have my, community. That's what's important. This is school. This will always be there. And I really resonated with what Annum said, because, even if you're failing in something, like, I still have to try, because otherwise I'm stagnant. And that's like, when she said that, I'm like, yes, that's true. You have to keep going, because college isn't easy. It's not. Nobody really tells you, nobody's gonna hold your hand. So, I mean, I guess if you want me to be, like really, really specific about certain struggles, how I got over that, I'd say I had a really good support system. Really, really good support system. My family was always there for me. Personally, I have my own therapist that I talk to, because I'm not the kind of person that vents to friends. Like, that's not how I cope. I don't like venting to other people. Like, I have someone that, that really, really understands my struggles. So, and I go to her. I've been going to her for the last 3 years, and I really appreciate her for like what she's done for me, because like without her, like I would say that I wouldn't be where I am here today. Like, her and my mom are like some of the most important women in my life currently. So that's how I would say I'd wrap up my kind of academic kind of thing, you'd say.
What I heard from each of you is like how your journey mentally like affected each of you in different ways, but kind of you guys all use kind of the same word as like some form of like depression, either be it from not just school, but the environment or whatever internally you were feeling itself. So Imran, he kind of went over how he coped with it and what's really helped him, which thank you so much. I know, especially in our communities, it's really hard to come out and say that you are, getting therapy, that you are getting help. And I think that letting people know that it really gives hope and understanding to other people, and letting them know that, outside sources is completely okay to go that route. So I want to ask, because, Maryam, Annum, I want to ask both of you actually the way you coped, because it sounds like, both of you went through, especially Annum, I'll start with you. You even went through a time where you took yourself out of the environment that you felt was causing you, the depression, which is, the school environment just itself. So kind of tell me a little bit about how you did cope and, find yourself to go back to school, because, some of us, there's some people that are like, I can't go back because of the hardship or, the challenges they went. It's really hard to now say, you know what, I'm ready to go back. So kind of talk about that journey.
Okay, so I'm going to be just honest. I don't think that there are a lot of different ways that people cope. There are versions where you kind of disassociate with kind of what is going around, and you use mediums of ways to disassociate from the problems that you're going through. A lot of what I just did was, honestly, to begin with, I avoided entirely the situation, because I was in this state of just giving up. When all your life you're thinking you want to do something, you tend to just, I mean, not everyone, but I honestly, that's the first time in my life I actually felt like giving up. My coping strategy changed through that entire semester. And honestly, the person that I am is entirely from that semester. I was a very broken person to now I believe I'm very strong and capable of handling anything that life throws at me because of my faith entirely. I would say I wasn't that strong in my faith throughout my high school life. If I'm being brutally honest, I let go of hijab as well. I started off as a hijabi and I let go of my hijab after high school and throughout my freshman year of college. I just completely broke down, and utilizing my faith in that period of time that I had as a means to bring myself back to a place where I feel like I am worthy of even going back to college and being a person that gets to do something that I love to do is what I ended up doing. I've never felt more connected to my religion, even now, if I look back to that semester, than I did in that semester, where I was entirely broken down. I prayed a lot. Like every moment I got, I went to Fajr, I went to Maryam Masjid. Maryam Masjid became my favorite masjid because of that semester. I utilized Islam a lot. I utilized my family a lot. I didn't have a very strong connection with my parents before that. I feel like when you are the most broken and you feel like you can't be any more broken than you ever have been, is when you realize that like you're not alone. Because I tended to think that like my burdens or like me having my problems were like burdens on other people. And I always got that at least you're not this, or at least you're not going through that. So I would tend to believe my problems aren't that big. They're not that serious. But going to family, using Islam and realizing that like I am in a place where I could utilize help around me, it's kind of what I did. And here I am.
Did you ever think about going to an outside source to get help?
Yes, I did. So in high school, my senior year of high school, I had a therapist, kind of like Imran was talking about. And again, in Waco, there weren't that many Muslim people. So I had a therapist. I went to a church for her. And she was a therapist through that church. And she would use a lot of ideals that just weren't ideals that a Pakistani female Muslim would hear in her life. So a lot of that help just became kind of useless in that situation. And it honestly mixed up my emotions even more, because there would be times where she would bash my parents for things or talk about Islam in a way that it wasn't rude entirely, but there were things that she would mention where I would start to even question things that like I would do in my daily life. So that resource, while it is necessary to have a therapist, it wasn't exactly the way that Imran's situation went for me. And so I guess I kind of like pushed myself away from therapy after that entire situation.
I'm so glad you brought that up, only because I want to show and let people know that when you experience therapy in different ways, that some can be, with Imran can be very impactful. And with Annum, it was a complete opposite. And the main difference is the way you were able to connect with your therapist, the way you had an understanding with your therapist. It didn't work for Annum and she found other ways, but that is an important factor. Okay, Maryam, what about you?
I would say, like, basically what Annum and Imran said, a lot of it for me was just like my connection with God. I kind of had, like what Imran said, like this epiphany in high school. And that's what kind of got me out of that, like, depression and my world, like the world's gonna end, it's over mentality. During sophomore year, which I said was like the lowest point that I was at, I like family relationships, friend relationships, school, everything was just wrong. That summer, my dad was so kind to take us to Turkey for a vacation. And I think that's what helped me heal, because I was away from that toxic environment. I was no longer in this. I think like as a society, as an American society, we're very much like driven, and you have to work all the time. And it's almost like you don't get a break, and you forget about religion, kind of like what Annum said. You become very dedicated to like this, I have to be a good student, I have to get a good job, I have to make money. And then when I went to Turkey, and like I was surrounded by mosques, I was surrounded by Muslims, and just like people who were so connected to God, I was like searching within myself. And that's when I was like, you know, when I die, like God is not gonna be like, why did you fail math? Like he's not gonna care. And that's what the like what hit me. And it kind of just like made me redirect my focus, like prioritize my life. Like it's also that kind of idea that we have in Islam where like everything happens for a reason. And I realized that there was a deeper meaning behind that failure, which was like I needed to learn to fail so that I could overcome bigger struggles. And I tell everyone, like, if I hadn't failed in high school and I had taken that and I decided to go to medical school and I had failed in college, I don't think I would have been able to handle that failure. And I think it would have been like catastrophic. So to have it in high school was much better than to have it in college. So just understanding like the bigger meaning of life, and that sometimes we feel really, really bad because we're supposed to learn something from it. And I'm glad I failed, because it made me look into myself and like also realize that, hey, medicine is not for me. And I have like really good talents and passions I can actually put into a work where I'd be happy to show up to work every day, instead of this thing that, yes, it's good. Like I had a fascination with medicine, but not so much like I can go every day and work in medicine. So that was one. And then I would say also another thing that was brought up was like family. I know a lot of the times like people don't have the support system, which is really sad, but I'm grateful that I do have a really good support system. Like when I was failing, my dad would always tell me, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. Like it's fine. You can just take it again. And I was honestly shocked, because my dad is the type of person who has very high standards, and was always like pushing me to be my best. Like he's the type of parent, as an immigrant parent, like if I got second place, why didn't you get first? Or if you got a 99, why didn't you get 100? So when he told me like, don't stress, it's not a big deal, you can retake it, you can move on, like it's fine. I was very shocked, because I had developed that toxic mentality and he didn't even have it. And I was like, why did I think that you would be mad? So it was that like support from them, and just like my mom is very supportive. Like I would always vent to her. I'm not much to go, like I'm not a fan of like therapy personally. I know it's very good, but I'm not comfortable with sharing my emotions with a stranger. And so my mom has always been like a person I go to if I had a bad day. I tell her like everything. She knows everything that happens in my life. She's my best friend. So she would always like let me cry on her shoulder, and she'd be like, it's fine, like you'll get through it. And they would also like validate me. Like when I'd say, for example, my teacher said this, or a student said this, and it would be something very negative, they'd be like, yeah, that's super negative, nobody should be saying that. So I didn't feel like I was crazy. So that was, I would say like support and religion definitely helped.
So, Maryam, you brought up some really great points about failure and self-realization. And honestly, we can do a whole nother conversation about failure. It's like, so it brings you to a place of really like where we need to be is self-understanding and self-realization. You brought up the way, you felt you would have coped differently if things happened to you in high school versus college. And I want to speak to and that aspect, because we have people here that either have high schoolers as kids, or they're high schoolers that are listening, and they're in it right now, right? They're in those AP classes. They're like just going along and like, this is too much. Like I don't know how to keep this up. How would you guys kind of tell them like how the coping is different versus like in high school versus college? Because it seems like what all of you kind of told me, what I'm hearing is like in high school, each of you had an understanding of what you thought you wanted to be, And of course, there's a lot of people that don't even know that in high school. they don't even really connect. All of you happen to have this strong passion of, well, this is what I want. Although it didn't work out, but you had that kind of direction and goal. Imran, what would you say about that?
How how high schoolers can possibly cope with that workload?
Yeah, with the workload and how it's like coping is like different, like when you were in high school to where it is in college.
Absolutely. In high school, I would say a lot of the issues that are connected to that, I really do believe that parents do make it a lot more difficult on their children than they need to. So, for example, I think, parents come here and I think, they don't really have a full understanding of what AP courses really entail and the kind of commitment that just one AP course takes. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's a college level course that's provided in high school that, contingent on passing an exam will grant you college credit that you can, redeem for, doing less time at, actual school. And I think, parents don't really understand, just like, oh yeah, that sounds amazing. Do 7. And it's it's just, high schoolers are like, wow, my parents are just telling me to do, all of these, but they don't even really understand that my social life is going to suffer. This requires, a level of discipline that I just don't have yet. Did they even, put this kind of discipline? Did they instill this discipline in me, or are they just telling me to do this because it sounds good? So, but that's what I think it happens in high school. So I don't even think they really need to cope. I think parents just need to be understanding and, just let your students just study. Let them study in peace. Don't do all this pressure, because I guarantee you they're probably going to be retaking a lot of the same courses that they retook. They took AP courses for anyway. I know I did. Took at least 6, during high school, and I retook 4 of them. I only really used 2. So that's saying something. And I paid for these courses. But in college, the only thing, I'll just be very honest, it's just you have to. The coping is just you have to understand what it means to have a work-life balance. You have to see college as a job. So it's just you're not really going to school anymore. Now you're paying to go to school. Taxpayers are not funding your education there anymore. Now you're paying to actually receive a certification, advance your career, because now you're paying for it. Shouldn't you take it seriously? I know that even I was given multiple scholarships. I still didn't take it seriously. I didn't really take school seriously until my junior year when things really got tough. And I'm like, wow. And then I lost my academic excellence scholarship because I was playing around. I didn't see it as like a job, and that's the thing. I had a job. I had 2 internships that I secured, and I was working, getting, but that's the thing. I didn't see my coursework as a job. Those 4 or 5 courses, that's some commitment. So in order to cope, I think you have to practice. It's discipline. It's real. That's the end of the day. It's discipline. You have to understand, if I'm paying for this, do I want to get something out of it? Just be honest with yourself.
Honestly, that's some of the best advice I've heard about that, because that's such a great perspective and way of looking at college. Um, okay, all of you are speaking, and this is really great to hear. Like, all your parents have been, mashallah, very supportive in there. But as you all know, I'm sure you have friends who don't have such supportive parents. I once spoke at a school at Fort Bend ISD, and I literally had the teachers come up to me and say, why are South Asian parents emailing me, asking me why their child got a 95 and not 100? They're like, we don't understand what is going on. We don't understand this amount of pressure you're putting on these middle schoolers. And this was middle school at that time. And like Imran kind of spoke about, like the levels of in high school, the AP classes are, yeah, you're right, your college level. And what we have to understand with brain development and puberty at high school age is so different than college, right? You're able to manage and understand yourself a little better than in high school. So in high school, you have this environment of, AP level classes, and you learn to take now like 5, 6 at a time, and then deal with your extracurriculars like sports or whatever you have to do, because as you guys know, to get into college, you just can't be making straight A's anymore. You can't just have a high GPA. You need a resume of things that you've been doing. So it's intense. It's a lot to cope with. So I want to ask you guys, if you could go back and change anything in the way you personally coped or managed, it can be either in high school or in college, what would you have done differently? It can be one instant or something that stands out in your mind. I'll start with you, Maryam, but I feel like I want to ask all of you this question.
I think the biggest thing that I would change is I had like a fixed mindset, and we can go into that a little bit, but like I basically believe that whatever I was good at, I was born to be good at, and then whatever I wasn't good at, I was not born to be good at. So like I was really good at math in like middle school and in elementary school. I was always like known that I'm good at like puzzles and those like IQ test type of stuff. I'm not good at writing and not good at reading. That's what I told myself, right? And so when I got to high school, my first class that I did bad in, and that's why it was like a shock, and I think God did it on purpose, was math. And to give perspective, I skipped 2 grades in math in middle school. Like I was good at math, okay? I got there and I think we had a quiz the second day of school, okay? And I got a 70. I think something like that. Like it was awakening. Like I was like, oh my gosh. And in my mind, it was like I could not comprehend. It was such a shock because I was like, this is something that I'm good at. I'm born to be good at this. And then doing bad at it was like, and I was the type of person who believed like you're born with a talent. You cannot grow, you cannot get better. Like you're either an artist or you're not an artist type of thing. And I wish I had more of a growth mindset, because as soon as I got my first grade, I just remember like coming back home and like breaking down. Like I was just crying the first day of school. I was telling my parents, like, I can't do this. Like, this is too much. And I think that if I had just sat down and thought about like, okay, and applied myself and looked at all the course material and said, what do I have to do to succeed? I could have been a straight A student at that school. It's not it's not a secret that it was a hard school. For sure, it was hard, and I don't blame myself for doing bad in that school. But I think if I had just been more open with myself and just been like, okay, I did bad. What can I do? I should just go to tutoring. If I go to tutoring, maybe I can do practice. If I apply myself, then I can do better. And I think that's what made me do so bad freshman and then sophomore year, because I had really like stuck with that mindset into sophomore year, and I just given up. I was like, I'm never going to do good in the school. There's nothing for me. I'm going to fail no matter what. And that's just what I put in my head. And I think a lot of the times we bring ourselves down. Like, at least for me, that was my biggest thing. Like, I know other people have friends and family and stuff like that bring them down, but I never had that. Like, nobody ever brought me down. It was just me. I was my biggest critic. I'm a perfectionist. I always told everyone, like, I'm my biggest hater. And that's what stopped me from succeeding, in my opinion. I feel like if I had some, if I believed in myself and I said, you can do this, you just have to work harder. I wasn't used to working hard. I wasn't used to discipline, as Imran said. I didn't have discipline. I was always the kid who did good, talented, whatever. I didn't have to study. I hadn't had to study for years because I came from Syria to here, and, education level was much lower here. So I think that's the biggest thing, like not knowing discipline, not knowing hard work, and just having this fixed mindset. So it
sounds like also like you actually limited yourself is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I very much put myself down. I was like, I'm not going to do good. I'm already like at the bottom. I'm not going to succeed.
Okay. And then what about you?
Yeah, so I 100% agree with what Maryam said, or close to 100%. I was also my honestly biggest enemy and I just thought that honestly, if I were to answer this question pretty straightforward, it would be that I tend to see in today's time, and being in the education major that I am, and I noticed that a lot of times we try to disassociate ourselves from reality, and we use coping mechanisms like friends. And honestly, I was just always watching Netflix, using anything and everything to stay away from like what my actual problems were. Sorry, that's my cat. So in high school, I would really just avoid my problems as much as I possibly could. And I feel like watching today's children as well, and like people in high school, I feel like that is something that we always tend to do. We just disassociate ourselves from our problems and our reality, and we don't really look at the actual problem, and we just kind of, we let it go on for too long, and then we wish that we could have intervened earlier to fix that problem. And that was my problem. I let it go on for too long. So like, alhamdulillah, Maryam was able to nit it in the butt like in high school, but my entire situation trailed into college. And like she said, it can be a catastrophe, but alhamdulillah, it isn't a catastrophe. You can always fix it. You can always fix your problems. So I just let that problem trail on for too long because I just disassociated myself from reality. And then I just watched the problems keep going. And then that's when I realized, like, I think I need to be more present and grounded in the moment, like that I am in right now, and stop trying to avoid the problems and take it a step at a time, because you're making more progress by even baby steps. I also was never taught baby steps. I was taught just like, go at it, go hard, like the just do it type of, like, you know, the hustle culture is kind of what I also believe that immigrant parents have in their minds, where they're just like go hard, like just do it all, like just get it completed, you know, like there's no such thing as giving yourself grace, like being graceful with yourself. And I never did that with myself. I was my worst enemy. I was my worst critic. Like my biggest critic, like I just didn't allow myself grace all the way up until college. So I think I've made more progress in baby steps than I ever did in college, in high school, when I was taking those AP classes. I failed AP Cal, like I didn't do good either. And I was great at math all the way, just like Maryam said, I was great at math all the way up till algebra, and then things just went downhill. But then I was just like, you just need to be good at it. Like, just do it, just get it done. Just make that A. Like a B is not enough, a C is not enough. Baby steps is no such thing. There's no such thing. So coping in high school was more so just like me looking at where I am now, and then being like, I need to get to that A+, and not understanding that there's an entire process to that journey. And coping in college became more so that I'm graceful with myself, and allowing myself to be graceful and more present in the moment, and not avoiding my problems, gave me more progress. And now I reward my progress instead of like criticizing my progress, if that makes any sense. You're on mute.
Over, especially when we see is such a huge issue with so much of the youth is this concept of coping with avoidance, like you said, just to numb it out. So much so that they're so disconnected with themselves. They don't know what they're feeling. They don't even know what they're feeling. And when you just turn to, like you said, Netflix, any numbing device, your phone, anything that kind of disconnects you from the present, is the way a lot of, kids now, the youth, are connecting. And that's the only way they know how to cope. And then again, your struggle was you waited too long, because by the time, you were finally understanding the concept of what is important to you, you were already in college. So that's such great points you brought up. Imran, what about you?
In high school, I think I went through a bit of a depressive phase in high school, especially my senior year. And to be honest, I coped horribly. And I think a critique of, I think just a lot of, men in general, is that we tend to keep things in. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was keeping in all my frustration, all my anger, all my hurt. And, and eventually doing that is so dangerous because eventually you're going to get to a point where you're going to be triggered and then you're going to explode, on all that energy is just going to burst out in a very, and you have to have a cathartic way of going about things. But since I have, my mom was just such a, incredible person in my life, she recognized that I needed help. I was completely like, I was not speaking, like I was just a shell of my former self. So she's the one that actually connected me to my therapist. And that's eventually how we got that going. And, I just wanted to bring up, I'm not trying to start an argument at all, just a counterpoint to what Maryam said about, telling your problems to a stranger, because the thing is, my mom is the most honest woman I know, absolutely the most honest woman I know, like period. But the thing is, I also want someone else to not validate my emotions. I want someone to give me honesty. And so if I already have someone that's so incredibly honest, why can't I just have two? So it's like, that's what made sense to me. And it's like, it's a different way of receiving honesty. My mom gives me, that honesty, but it's also, coded in, the affection of the mother-son relationship. But, my therapist gives me just a really good outlook on things. She just reflects back all my BS basically. And then I can see it, and my self-awareness is increased throughout the years. But in terms of actually coping, exercising, like eating well, like practical things to actually cope, and just, talking about things periodically. Now I don't hold things as much anymore. Now I'm very vulnerable. I'm honest. If someone asks me what's going on, I'll be honest. But it's a two-way street. And, if somebody, that honesty has also gotten me in trouble because if I'll be honest, if I don't want to have a relationship with someone anymore, if somebody's asking me what's going on, I'll just be like, hey, I actually don't even feel comfortable telling you about what's going on, and I actually don't want to do this moving forward. And that's just how I understand, you have to navigate relationships too. College is not just about, and I'm not talking about romantic relationships. I'm just talking about relationships in general. Just, you have to, I think college is a great way to learn human dynamics. So that's how I would say I would started coping with things.
I actually love that you said that, because another thing that I actually did grow from as well is setting boundaries. In high school, I had no idea how to say no. I'm such a huge people pleaser, like such a huge people pleaser. I think learning how to set those boundaries and it's okay to say no is something that I also learned about myself, and how to stay focused as well. So I'm like really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, you guys are bringing up amazing points. And just, well, the one thing, I want everyone to kind of leave with is what advice, and this would be a great advice too, but what advice would you give others that are just struggling right now? Be it, middle school, high school, it doesn't matter the age. What advice from basically based on what you've learned, your experiences, where you are now? And again, you're at this point of graduation, and I think I was speaking to one of you guys, and it's like, okay, you guys are in the phase of now what? Like now what? Like this is all I've known my whole life is, to be a student. And yes, you can, do graduate school and carry on and do other things. But I call it, wake up to adulting, becoming an adult officially almost, although you guys are now. But once you graduate, there's a level of expectation too, right? Which is great. So final thoughts on your advice. What would you give? Maryam, I'll start with you.
I would say my biggest advice is to kind of like, I guess, be realistic with yourself, if that makes sense. Like a lot of the times we get overwhelmed emotionally, and that's not wrong. You're supposed to feel your emotions and you should let them out. But like kind of what Imran said, we don't normally like express them. We bottle them up. So we're not feeling them. And then we're like just overwhelmed and we become not rational, in my opinion. Like, I don't feel like I was rational when I was at my lowest points. And I think taking a step back and having someone to talk to, whoever is like good with you, kind of like Imran said, for example, his therapist was like a no BS zone, right? I feel like for me, my dad was that type of person. Like, my mom offered emotional support. My dad was like, here's advice. And I still go to my dad for advice. I'm obviously a college student, I'm grown, but whenever I'm struggling or I'm overwhelmed, I go, Baba, do you have any advice for me? And I take his advice very seriously. It's really good advice. You know, adults tend to know a little bit better than you. It's a good thing. But I think, you know, taking a step back and then like having steps, I think is important, especially if you're transitioning, let's say from like high school to college, and then maybe even college to like a work or becoming a full-fledged adult, is having those steps. I don't know if it was Imran or Annum that mentioned this, but in high school, you're like just working, working, working. And then in college, you're on your own. You have your own classes, you have your own, you can choose your own internships, your own jobs, your own extracurriculars, where you want to be, your parties, friends, whatever it is, you're on your own and you can make your own schedule. It's just about being realistic. Like, you can apply this to anything, like your coursework. How much should I be taking? Am I supposed to be taking like 18 credits or 20 credits? Because like some people go overboard. Or maybe this semester I'm working a job and I need to take 12 or 9 credits. I need to be realistic with myself. Or where, like, what organization should I be in? And then on top of being realistic is like having steps. Like, okay, for this class, what do I need to do to get an A? Or for this job, what do I need to do to succeed? And you need to, like, those baby steps that Anam was saying, have them and check in. Like, you're not going to get that A overnight. And I think that goes back to realistic. A lot of us are not realistic. We just think we're going to exist and we're going to succeed. That's not how success comes to be. You have to put in the effort and you have to put in the work. And part of that is like planning. So that's the final advice that I would leave people with.
I love that. You know, the number one thing I'm hearing is realistic goals. Being realistic is something I am very strong in my therapy. Like, we had to be realistic with what our goals are and actually who we are and what we're wanting. Annam, what about you?
Yeah, so I agree with that to some point, but I also think that being realistic is a really big deal. But I think I use this a lot in all of my life. And my dad has said this to me ever since I was little. He says, reach for the moon, but you'll land amongst the stars. So like, have those high goals for yourself. Like, if I want to become a teacher, go become the best teacher, go get teacher of the year, go start an organization, Texas Muslims, by the way. I have these goals, and if I don't land at the moon, at least I'll land amongst the stars. And that is something to be proud of. Like, whatever I am today, I know, like, little me, like, if I look back at her, is really proud of me. And my journey is honestly 99% of your life is your journey. Your end goal, it's called an end for a reason. Like, you going through your journey is literally like you, like, that's who you are, that's what made you. And like, another thing that I like love to say to myself is like, I'm the only person that's ever going to go do my journey. Like, I'm not, like, we sit here and we try to impress the world, but like, this is your journey. You're the only one who gets to live it. So make these mistakes, learn from them, get back up and be stronger. Like, your scars are a part of your story. It's a part of like your resiliency. And like, I'm proud of like taking that semester off and learning about myself. And like, it's another thing is like, it's okay if it takes longer than what society thinks is correct. So if it's longer than 4 years bachelor's degree, great. Like, you got to spend more time learning about yourself. If it's different from someone else's story, that doesn't mean it's not perfect. And perfection is never a thing to begin with.
What I like the most of what you're saying is, honestly, learn from your failures, learn from your mistakes, learn more about yourself. Yeah. And I feel like that's something that I heard from all of you, to be honest with you. Okay, Imran, let's hear from you. We'll like close it out after that.
Can I hear the question one more time?
Sure. It's just like, what advice would you leave anybody based on, kind of things that you've kind of been through? What's that one advice that people are you feel are struggling with, that you would leave them with? One solid advice.
Something I learned from my dad is since he's a man of few words, I learn a lot just by like observing him. And something I learned is just about immediate acceptance. There's going to be so many things in this world that you can't control. So many things that are, yet we become so upset. We will get offended, or we have an emotional response that's incited because we see something that we inherently don't agree with. But just understand that you can only do what you can do. And if you can influence that particular event, do so. But to, expend your energy, on things that are honestly just going to upset you. And that's something that I've learned from him. And that's what keeps him young. That's what keeps him happy. And that's what I've learned is just if you just accept life, because there's not going to, I'm not talking about condoning wrong things, but I'm talking about accepting things as you go. If something happens to you personally, if you learn something from it, that's the best thing you can take.
Honestly, Imran, I love that being the last thing you say, that acceptance is such a huge part of whatever comes your way, right? The bad, the good, the ugly, like we say, and there's a huge part of just accepting. Honestly, I am so thankful for each and one of you. You were vulnerable, you were honest, and it was such an insightful, amazing discussion. I already know so many people can relate to what all of you guys have been through. As a parent, I loved hearing all these positive things that you spoke about your parents. And yes, I know everyone's situation is different, but to hear all the positivity really gives me hope as a parent too, and I think for parents that are watching, this is so insightful. This is so to have an understanding on the other side where, as you guys know, you've been through being a teenager, that now after hearing your own experiences, you have this moment of reflection and you can be at this point. But during that time, you are not in a place to have these conversations, right? You couldn't really understand. So as parents, it's really insightful to hear these things that everyone has kind of been through to do that. I want to thank everybody else for joining, and hopefully, inshallah, we can have more panel discussions about, just our struggles and things that we go through. So I wanted to thank everybody, and inshallah, I'll see you guys soon. Assalamu alaikum. Bye.
Alaikum.